Today we're talking to Jeff Maelstrom, founder of GreenSpear. GreenSpear converts CO2 into anode-grade graphite using low-temperature liquid metal catalytic reactors. GreenSpear is a value-add producer transforming sustainably sourced CO2 into a valuable critical mineral, encouraging the use of carbon as a valuable resource. I really loved your pitch because of all the pitches there from an outsider's perspective. It seemed like once you just scale the technology and system, like it's a great business.
Yeah,
I know you might feel differently about that.
no, I mean it's kind of a no-brainer of like there's a giant demand for graphite, and the only way to get it right now is technology that's from the 60s or just digging it out of the ground. So there has to be room for innovation there, and I think we can really fill that gap.
Very much so. And so can you give everyone a cliff notes on the work that led up to GreenSpear?
Yeah, so I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, but I've got a background doing pretty much every vertical of engineering work. So electrical, software, automation, robotics. I don't sit still well. So prior to kind of starting this, I was director at a company that was miniaturizing pharmaceutical production equipment. So really working with kind of complex ingredients, conditions, and really making sure that we could, do good in the world with that work. And I really found that rewarding, that I was working on difficult problems and then moving into, doing good in the world. So when, as most startups, they ran out of money, I found myself with some time on my hands and really just dug into white papers. Found some interesting work coming out of Australia, kind of replicated it in my basement, and then kind of decided to figure out where I could scale this and kind of tweak it to make it my own, so I could have that path of, a difficult, challenging problem that's really engaging for me, that's also doing that good in the world.
Mm-hmm. So you just had a small bioreactor in your basement and you were just making experiments.
Yeah, I have a very patient partner.
Love to hear that. When we talk about graphite, this is green graphite, which means that you are reducing CO2. You're capturing CO2 in a system, and then Can you explain the concept of carbon valorization for everyone? That's really
Yeah,
what I'm trying to
so
get at.
just a clarification, we're not actually capturing. We're going to be partnering with those organizations, because I think that's a whole giant engineering challenge in itself. So we're really just talking on that utilization point. So my big philosophy is carbon capture is amazing, but there's no reason to do it until there's a way to add value in. Just industry isn't going to do something just because it's the right thing to do and it needs to be done. They need to make their money. So very much the tact I take is we can use this as a valuable feedstock that is normally a waste from all these industries, whether it's power generation, fertilizer generation. Like there's tons and tons of CO2 emitted, and that's dollars that's just going up into the air. So the whole point of valorization is to recapture that value and do it in a way that's, emissions negative or reducing emissions, to do some good in the world while also making a bit of money on the side.
And so when you turn the equation more into an economic one rather than environmental, this starts to make sense. And because you're not capturing the CO2, this was kind of preempted one of my questions, which was, can this system sit anywhere? But it sounds like you take the CO2 from a partner and then you build it maybe in some manufacturing plant nearby.
Yeah, the dream is to partner with someone that's making big capture equipment, whether that's point source or direct air capture, and just co-locate with them, so I can just immediately be offloading that CO2. Our cost structure is such that we can afford to ship it and pay that pricing to get the CO2 out to us. But of course, fewer shipping of compressed gases is a lot cheaper and a lot easier to do. So that's definitely the ideal.
Mm-hmm. And then I want to bring up the elephant in the room, which is the Chinese battery market. Obviously, the costs continue to come down. I think the latest cost I've seen was LFP battery prices are $75 a kilowatt hour. It might be a little bit lower than that, which is ultimately driving down the cost of electric vehicles and home batteries and things of that nature. It seems like the market is big enough for lots of players, even US-based ones. Can you talk more about how you think about competing with really low prices out of China?
Yeah, like you said, that's definitely a big red flag for a lot of people, because it's such a industrial powerhouse. So right now, China produces about 85% of the world's graphite for batteries. So that's both natural, where they're digging it out of the ground, and synthetic, where they're essentially burning out petroleum products to kind of reorganize those carbon molecules. So I think it's an opportunity, as much as it's scary to compete with China. They've shown that they'll cut off those exports. Graphite is on their list of restricted material. They've pulled that lever with Japan and Korea that, hey, we're not going to sell you graphite right now, figure it out. And it's really impacted their ability to make those cells at the rate that they want to make them and at the capacity that they have to make them. So, I mean, everyone's really scrambling for alternatives. And while there's not really a drive in the market yet for a cleaner material, I think those regulations are on the horizon, which also bodes well for us. But then also just looking at, the IRA and those incentives for onshoring that production to the US, we don't really have much in the way of natural graphite reserves. I think there's one mine in Alaska and I think one in Arkansas maybe. So we really need to find alternative ways of making this really valuable material. And it definitely is kind of the unsung hero in the battery realm. Everyone's looking for lithiums or cobalts or like the next better battery technology. Lithium ion batteries are a workhorse and they're around for a reason. We need to build up those supply chains as much as we can.
So let's talk a little bit about graphite within a battery. How much percentage is of a battery is graphite?
It's like 40% by weight. So if you're looking at an EV on the road, the average EV on the road has between 50 and 100 kilograms of graphite in it, depending on the battery capacity. So it adds up really fast. Like in the US, there's about 300,000 tons per year of graphite used in these anodes. So it's a massive, massive market that we need to fill.
And so without giving away any special sauce, what differentiates your green graphite from others entering the space?
Yeah, so a big thing is we're using a catalytic method. So in a pretty cool way, we're using liquid metal catalysts, which are it's like Terminator 2. Date myself a little bit. But I think the big difference between us and some of the other startups in this arena is because we're not focused on capture and we're using, technology that's not reinventing the wheel to make this scale up. We're positioned in a place that, our secret sauce to our process is adaptable to really rapidly ramp up and potentially allow us some additional controls over things like crystal size and shape coming out of the graphite. Which could be a really valuable proposition to some of these battery manufacturers.
Yeah. So in terms of customers, you don't have to say anything publicly if you don't want to, but what types of customers would you work with? Is it just battery OEMs? Is it the actual EV OEMs? Talk more about that.
Yeah, it's pretty much anyone that is making a battery. Most of these larger automakers, some of them do have their own lines, like a Tesla makes their own cells. But then there's people who just use, off the shelf Samsung or LG, just prismatic lithium ion cells. So it really depends on the manufacturer, whether they're putting together their own cells or their own packs or making everything from scratch. But we're really targeting anyone that's making those cells. So like the cells in a power drill, for example, they're probably going to be like a little cylindrical cell, about yay big, what's called an 18650. And those are all made by Samsung, LG, those type of people. So we would love to have them as our kind of mass scale customer.
Yeah, I mean, those would be big logos on the website.
Yeah.
So if you read, the Bill Gates climate book, he talks about the green premium. Would you say that Green Spear has that green premium attached? And do you find ways of bringing it down, maybe through carbon credits or other means?
So especially in these early days of scaling, we are unfortunately going to suffer from that premium price. That's just the nature of, making things in lower quantities. We believe that when we get to scale, we can really be cost competitive with what's on the market right now. And I think that's a really kind of North Star point for me, is to make sure that we're making a product that doesn't work only because it's greener, but also just works in the market. So very much, it's a better product in general and on price, and it just so happens to be better for the environment. And that's really what I want our business to be based on. Not saying I won't take full advantage of those, tax credits and incentives from things like the IRA, but really having that as kind of being icing on the cake is, I think, really important for the longevity of the business.
Yeah, I like that stance. I think you did mention in your pitch, you don't want to be reliant on the carbon credits to drive the business, because they will eventually run out. And at that point, you need to make sure the product is at price parity with others. So I do like that stance. In terms of other use cases of graphite, is there anything that's not talked about enough, or something that's maybe non-obvious for graphite use?
Well, I mean, so graphite's used everywhere, from everything from pencils to industrial lubricants to kind of lower quality anodes for like metal production. So anyone making aluminum uses tons and tons of graphite. But kind of the problem with it is it's so cheap in the impure forms that we're never going to be able to compete there. So we're really only competitive in this very high purity, very consistent sized particles. that you need for these battery applications.
Super interesting. I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about just building a startup in the climate space in 2024. You may have been at this a couple of years now. What sort of advice do you have for founders hoping to break in? I know climate is super broad, so specifically maybe in your space, what advice do you have for founders?
Well, first, just start doing it. It's really easy to, have that idea and think about it and kind of daydream, but you really need to just put the pen to paper and just start working on it, whether it's spare time or, if you're between jobs, so just digging into it. That's the first thing. And then just meet people. So there's tons of, Slack groups, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever have you. Just start meeting people and talking about it and share the ideas that you're passionate about and see what other people are passionate about. And maybe you'll find something where it overlaps and you can build from there. But yeah, the biggest thing is just start.
Yeah, despite how scary it is. Did you meet any co-founders or hire any advisors or employees through some of these communities?
I've met several advisors through it, both formal and informal, just people who have been mentors to me, either through their own journey through startups and founding, or specifically as an advisor towards, building adjacent to the battery space.
And then in terms of 2025, so let's look forward a little bit in a future state of the company. What are the next big milestones for GreenSpear?
Yeah, so we're trying to lock in funding. We're in the finals for some grants, as well as raising venture capital, which is an adventure.
Yes.
But the big thing is really producing a lot more material. So we're essentially lab scale right now, where we can make a couple grams of graphite per day, which is enough for us to get test results on and say, hey, we're making great material. It works excellent in your application. But to really start locking in these customers, they want to see that we're making not only a quality product that they can use, but also that it's consistent and that we can make enough of it to really put a dent in their supply chain. So the next big step is really scaling up that production to output, kilos per day instead of that grams per day. And just, make it rain graphite everywhere to every lab, every customer we can talk to, throw out samples.
And so do you sort of do like priced contracts with potential customers? Maybe you have like a pilot phase and then you start to project 3 years out, oh, we're going to be at X revenue or X amount of kilograms delivered. Do you sort of price them out like that?
Yeah, so we're pricing out based a little bit on market and a little bit on what our cost of goods will be, especially for these kind of pilot scale, like lower scale manufacturing plants. And we're in discussions with a couple customers that are in that higher value but lower volume market. So people that'll be a little less price sensitive, but they can't get the quantity, the low quantities they need at a good price from, import material. So really trying to have those stepping stones as we scale of different customer segments that we can be selling to one group while we're evaluating with the next larger customer, and then kind of scale and scale.
Any customers that you can speak about today?
No one locked in, unfortunately. We have a lot of interest, but it's a come talk to us when you can send us a couple kilograms.
I gotcha. So just you just need to make it rain, I guess.
That's the fun kind of chicken and egg problem with some of these deep tech startups. You can't get customers till you've built large enough equipment. And building large equipment takes money, and so no one wants to invest until you have customers. So it's a bit of a circular logic there.
Yeah, the CapEx with the hard tech versus just writing code and deploying it is it's quite different. Great. Where can people find GreenSpear and learn more about your story?
Yeah, so we do have a website, which is a little sparse these days. I need to put some more effort in there, but it's just greenspear.xyz, or on LinkedIn, just GreenSpear, or they can just talk to me on LinkedIn, Jeff Maelstrom.
That's
and yeah, my email's all over the place. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Cool. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.